Hello, everyone. Welcome to Let's Talk Off the Podium. My guest today is Elaine Mitchener. The past 3 months, there's just so much happening in the world. What have you been doing? What have you been staying active with? Your own personal projects? What are you working on now?
Well, at the moment, I am preparing to relearn one song and to learn 4 new songs that have been written for me, which hopefully, COVID-19 willing, I will be able to perform in October. I can't say too much about that
Okay.
where I'm performing, but because it hasn't been officially announced yet. Publicly announced, but I certainly have my work cut out for me this summer. And you say the last 3 months, but like many other performers across the world, artists across the world, really just kind of processing the lack of work and how things have been snatched away. And you work so hard, people have been working for a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years for things to happen this year. And in a space of a few weeks, you just watch everything toppling and things melting away. And there's nothing you can do about it. So personally, I mean, I've been thinking about how I wish this experience to define me as a person, not just as a creative person, but as a person, and how I'm dealing with the sense of kind of creative loss or free fall, not loss, a creative free fall, and how I'm going to re-energize myself through that. So I've baked bread and I've spent time, I'm very lucky, I have a garden. I'm not a great gardener. I regard myself as an inconstant gardener, actually. But I have improved over the 3 months and really enjoyed spending time with plants and flowers and watching them grow and trying to figure out why things haven't happened in the way that I imagined, but allowing nature to teach me, and listening to the sound of the wind in trees and just bird song and bees humming, and so many bees. It's just amazing, but I'm not running away from them. I'm actually enjoying their company. I hope they're enjoying mine as well. So, I guess I was a little shell shocked, I should say, concussed with the suddenness of the loss of work, I think, and also the insecurity of the future. Because as a freelancer, we're used to the roller coaster ride of money coming in, money not coming in, expecting money to arrive at a certain time, and it will come eventually. We're used to that, and trying to save, trying to be sensible, not being sensible enough, all these things. But then I guess no one has had to really worry about whether there is a future for live performance, which is the area that I primarily work in, and engaging with an audience, and communicating with an audience. And I do miss that. So because I don't spend my time composing in a solitary way, most of my work is on stage, or developing the work, working with collaborators, creating something and then presenting it. It's quite hard to imagine the world without that. Or imagining my world without that. Although I am very grateful to the community. It's such an amazing community, and people have been incredibly supportive. We're all supporting each other, talking to each other, having a moan, but also people have approached me with some smaller commissions, which means I haven't been sitting on my backside, twiddling my thumbs and just eating badly for the last 3 months. Sure. I have been spending time, composing and creating as well. Really small things. Well, I say really small things. They're not insignificant. They're actually really important for me because it keeps my creative juices going.
Yeah. That's amazing. And, I'm so excited and so happy that James Gardner, who's from New Zealand, gave me your name. He's been on my podcast a couple of times. And when I reached out to him, I was like, hey, James, you want to come on a third time? He was like, how about instead of me, I give you a couple of names who I think are really inspirational artists. And one of the names was your name. So I'm happy he recommended you.
Oh, well, I'm happy that he recommended me too. I don't even think I know James very well. I think we follow each other on Twitter.
Yeah.
So forgive me, James, if we have actually met in person and I have forgotten. I do apologize, but please don't take it personally. We do follow each other and like each other's things or comment. It's, the world of the Twitter sphere is a strange one, and you just don't know who's picking up on what you're doing or not. And so that was incredibly generous of him to suggest my name. And I'm very, very happy to be here. So thank you. I'm sorry it has taken me such a long time
it's great.
to fix a date with you.
Your work is truly fascinating. And for those who, people will hopefully go and check out your website and the work you do on YouTube and other places. Yeah. But in words, how would you describe what you do? And I know you do so many different projects. We'll get to some of them. But what do you do? How would you describe your work in words to people who don't see it?
Okay, right. So essentially, I am a singer. And I work in a way that combines contemporary classical vocal techniques, extended vocal techniques with experimental and free improvised musical techniques and avant-garde jazz. But that's not all I do. I'm really interested in the way movement can impact on the voice as well, and driving dramatically ideas. So my performances combine the voice with arts that are physical and visual, so movement, dramatic staging, and it's a very holistic thing because it's requiring me to have a totality of expression with what I'm doing. So it's 100% a unification of like musical, physical, emotional, and political. I'm looking at all of those aspects and I'm exploring them, and exploring the expressive possibilities of these ideas, as well as testing out the physical limits of my own abilities. So it's not an easy process. It's often a very painful, arduous one. But out of that, I'm grateful and thankful that some works have come forth. And each time I present these works, they are organic. So they're not completely changing, but they're addressing things that are current as well. Nina Simone talked about our art reflecting the times, and I know that's not the case for every artist. That's not what they do, but for me it's been a natural kind of course to reflect the times, not necessarily directly, but it could be quite an oblique thing, but it's direct in the way it's communicated. So for example, before lockdown, I was in Bergen at Borealis Festival presenting a piece which I was commissioned to create in 2017 called Sweet Tooth. And Sweet Tooth looks at the relationship of the UK with the Caribbean and the legacy of the sugar trade and its contemporary echoes now. So when I started Sweet Tooth, I was thinking about the UK and the Caribbean. My heritage is Jamaican. My parents are Jamaican, and they met in London in the early 1960s. So if you know about British culture, the influence of particularly reggae, and also carnival, which is coming from Trinidad. There's it's really seeped into the DNA of British life. I mean, there are lots of people who love reggae, but it's had such an influence on pop music, for example. So, and it's okay, so it's music, but the link is a lot older. And so looking at Sweet Tooth, presenting it, I thought, well, actually, this isn't a Black History project. This project, from which I looked at archives taken from a diary and an inventory of a plantation owner, Simon Taylor, in 18th century Jamaica, and look at his diaries and the enslaved Africans that he owned, the tasks they were made to do, thinking about the mechanisms of slavery. I'm thinking, well, actually, this isn't just about Britain, this is about Western Europe. And then you look at the other countries that benefited, and you're probably wondering, why take it to Norway? Well, Norway the Norwegians had revered a very successful merchant who made his money by producing the iron shackles that were used to incarcerate enslaved Africans. And you think, oh, Norway, there can't be any. Yes, there are all these links. So it's Scandinavia. You think, oh my goodness, these are such liberal countries. Do they know their history? Yes, France, Germany, still grappling with its colonialist history. You know, Portugal, have they really dealt with it? No. Spain, the same. And so I think this is a world event. This was a Holocaust, and it involves the world. And now in 2020, last weekend in Bristol, anti-racist demonstrators, Black Lives Matters demonstrators, finally pulled down a statue that memorialized a man called Colston, who basically became very wealthy and rich through the slave trade. And I thought, okay, Sweet Tooth, yeah, it's relevant. It's relevant. It's talking about something that happened 400 years ago, but it's relevant.
Wow.
And so it's such a powerful piece, not because I'm saying that, but it is a powerful piece. It's a very harrowing piece to perform. But it's not a piece about victimization. It's a piece about strength and this incredible culture that has been born out of the Caribbean because of its very checkered history, but also the revolts that triggered the abolition movement. And that's something to feel proud of as someone who shares that heritage and has that heritage. I come from survivors and very strong people. So that's what I'm celebrating. And when we performed it in Bergen, it was an old town hall, which is 18th century. So it's around the same time all these things are happening. And it was really cramped. I had it staged so that people can't get away. The whole point of it is that they unbeknownst to the audience, I have done the seating so that they are very intimately close with someone next to them who might be a stranger, because what I wanted to evoke was this, what it might have been like was nowhere near the conditions that enslaved Africans were transported in. But it's this feeling of discomfort, this feeling of not being able to stretch out and kind of, as you might do in a concert hall. I don't want anyone to feel relaxed, and they need to come on this journey. And I was told by people afterwards that people crying, who didn't know what to do, they couldn't breathe, all these things. And so it's the intensity of the work. And I demand there's 4 of us performing, and we have to engage at that level every time we present it. So it's not a piece that you can kind of just toss off. And my work isn't like that. I kind of grab you by the neck and drag you along.
That's amazing. From what I've seen and read about your work, and also seen on YouTube and other platforms, is that it's truly an experience, in the moment experience. So this might be really tough for you to think about a future where some artists, kind of being negative, might say, you know, we really have to think about a different future for music or classical or jazz, because you're all about that moment in person experience, right? I mean, I get that feeling online on YouTube, but I would love to be at your performance, so I'm there in the moment, you know.
Invite me, I'll come over. No, I think yes, it is tough and it's hard, but I'm thinking back to the last performance I did before we weren't allowed to leave our homes, and that was at Café Otto. And Café Otto had a fundraising event, and they asked lots of amazing artists to perform. And I performed on the 23rd of March. And our government had been a bit reluctant to tell people to take coronavirus seriously. You know, I'd heard from everyone else and all over other parts of the world, just you only go out if absolutely necessary, wear a mask, shut these venues down, no one could go out, okay? And Café Otto had set up this system where there was only 4 of us in the space and we were all socially distanced. So it was being live streamed on their website and they were asking for donations. And I asked a friend, Kerry Young, a wonderful pianist, to guest, and you know, kind of text him and said, hey, are you all right? Are you feeling well? Are you doing anything tonight? No? Do you want to play at Café Otto? I'm performing. He was like, okay, I'll get the message out. So he was support caring. So he was brilliant. And we turned up and I was performing to an empty room practically. Okay, there was 3 other people. Kerry performed, then I performed. And you know, that was interesting because it felt really deeply sad, particularly as before I went on to do my set, one of the guys at Café Otto made an announcement and said, okay, this is the last time we will be presenting a live stream performance because as of this moment, after this, we have to close. Stay safe. And it felt terribly sad. But I also felt that I had a job to do. And I felt very honoured to be performing there. And also people were watching, you know, so there was an audience. And as a performer, you just have to focus, you know, you really have to focus and give, even if the room is empty. You know, and I've performed and I've emptied a room. Yeah, I've emptied spaces. So I know what it is. You know, I've seen people flee. You know, I've started doing things. So this is quite different. I mean, it was a really captive audience of like 4 of us, which was great, but held captive. But it was, but I realised that people were watching, and I'd watched other performances because I had some friends who'd been performing over the duration. So, you know, you could type in and you'd see people on, you know, on YouTube and say, hey, how are you? Oh, this is amazing. So it was kind of exciting as well and engaged, but it also felt a bit sad and poignant. I'm just grateful that I have the opportunity to present and to help the space, and I'm really looking forward to it reopening in some way or other. And I just think we're really, you know, creative people are adaptable, we're inventive, we try things, you know, we're not going to let this beat us, you know, and we'll find a way to present good music, you know, because let's face it, people will be hungry for music. They really want that experience. So it's not as though we won't have an audience. It's just how I feel sorry for venues. You know, they have to make some money. They're not charities. So it's going to be difficult. No one's saying it's not, but I think we will be patient and I think supportive, and in order to allow this new kind of approach to programming and presenting live music, we have to be very patient with it. Yeah. So, but I think, I mean, judging by the response to what we did that night, I think if you are performing and you're 100% committed to what you're doing, it communicates.
Going back, and I'm always interested to know who are the inspirations behind an artist. So who are some of the people that inspired you to do the work that you do? Whether they're musicians or not musicians, maybe a couple that come to mind, or maybe some, if it's too many, maybe some that just come to mind right now that are inspiring your current work.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, that's really, yeah, that's a, my goodness. Who has inspired me? Well, I'm drawing inspiration from, I'm not sure I can really cite any direct influences from any particular artists or musicians, because I'm listening all the time. I'm hearing different things, I'm experiencing things, and I draw on everyday everyday occurrences. So those things inspire me. I gave an account of something that happened in the supermarket a couple of days ago, simply because I was shopping for my mother and I passed a woman who was also shopping for her mother, and we both stood in front of the same items, and I wasn't on the phone to my mum, but had I been, I would have been saying the same thing to my mum as this woman was saying to hers, which is, Mum, no, they don't have any, they've run out, they've only got their own brand of this. Do you want this or not? Shall I get two? What do you mean 3? No, we can only have 2. Okay. And I started laughing because just what she was saying out loud is the conversation I was having to my mother in my own mind, to myself. I thought, am I going mad? Is this what's happening? But, I thought, okay, I'm going to file that experience away, because it was more about the energy, how she was saying it, her body language, how everyone's kind of scurrying around trying to get what they need. Everyone's got shopping lists. No one's really browsing, and it's that. So these things inspire me and have an influence from time to time on what I do, because I'm drawing from real life, and it will feed into something at some point. But I'm so lucky to have worked with amazing people and continue to meet amazing artists. But, I don't really want to cite any direct influences from any particular artists or musicians, but whenever I encounter great art or in any form, it is an inspiration for me. And what it does, it helps me to continue to do my own work, to take it further and to amplify it and to elevate what I'm doing, because the bar is set so high, so that's what inspires me. And people who have raised that bar, say, okay, I just want to attain that, and then keep working towards it, because it's the experience of art that interests me. Yeah.
Well, your projects, you have quite a few projects happening. I don't want to pick a specific myself, but if there's one that you want to talk about, I would love to hear about one of the projects that you want to talk about now. And I know you have quite a few happening.
Okay, recently, some live projects, vocal classics of the Black avant-garde, and the Jeanne Lee projects, which I'm trying to bring together. Jeanne Lee, who is primarily known as a jazz vocalist, and her voice is a jazz singing voice. But what interests me about her was that she was much more than that. She was a composer, she was a poet, she was a choreographer. She worked in contemporary classical music as well. She worked with sound poets, new people from Fluxus, and so what intrigues me about what she did and what she recorded was that, as someone who's worked in classical music as well, it's that whenever I've read about the people that she worked with, her name is very rarely mentioned. That is changing now. And so when I put together the Jeanne Lee project, it was really to kind of represent her legacy in another way, so that she could be looked and listened to in a different way, in a much more open way. And that's a really wonderful project that I'm hoping to add more of her repertoire, or the things that she was involved in as it goes along. I mean, I wasn't familiar with the work of Jackson Maclow, and then I came across a performance, a recording of a premiere, the text on the opposite page that she performed with him. And it's like a scratchy old recording, but I was like, oh my God, she's doing the stuff that I'm trying to do. And she did it then. I'm just like, why don't bother? Just throw the towel in. But it's, rather than do that, it's kind of, okay, right, let me learn more from this. So you were asking about inspiration and influences. It's not that she influenced me to do something differently. It's just to continue doing what I do, but trying to do it, take it further. There's other approaches. So I felt very inspired that actually I'm on the right path, when I looked at her legacy. And so that's examined more in terms of vocal classics of the Black avant-garde, where I'm looking at kind of these seminal works of kind of pieces by jazz composers, avant-garde jazz composers that were really politically driven. Pieces by Eric Dolphy, Archie Shepp, Joseph Jarman, also Jeanne Lee, and then also including a piece by a good friend and wonderful artist, Jason Yard, his Windrush Suite, which looks at the direct experience of Caribbean people in the UK, who came on the Empire Windrush, and then there was a huge scandal about their citizenship, whether they were British, just 2 years ago. And so I wanted to make it relevant to the Black British experience, as well as highlighting the works of the past that was talking about the conditions of Black people at that time in the 60s and in the 70s. I'm not interested in pastiche, or that just doesn't do it for me. So the kind of artists that I brought together for that, they've all bringing something to the table, and we reworked these so that it feels very fresh. It sounds very fresh by referencing the words, but also representing them in a way so we can channel the music in a different way, and that's really important for its relevancy. And I think great music can handle treatment. It's got to be torn apart, but it can still hold up, and that's what these pieces do. And I've talked about two pieces. There's the work that I do with Apartment House, which is a lot of the work of Julius Eastman, and also Charles Mingus's String Quartet No. 1 for voice and string quartet, which we premiered last year. And I mean, it's unbelievable music. Really exciting to do that when you can, it's one thing seeing the score, and then it's another thing bringing it to life, and there's all that responsibility, and it's so daring. It's really fantastic how he set. It's kind of based off The Clown, his piece The Clown, and it's using Frank O'Hara's text. So it's really, he's totally done amazing things with it. I mean, it's just the sound worlds that Mingus was kind of pursuing was just so unusual, and it's a chamber piece, it really works. So I'm very excited to be able to do that again at some point. Who knows when? Yeah. But maybe we'll record it. And I mean, you said I've got loads of pieces. There's one of the pieces that I've recently created is called The Then plus the Now equals Now Time. And it was supposed to be presented at the Triennale in September, but sadly, coronavirus has put paid to that. Vocal classics of the Black Avant-Garde should have been at the Holland Festival this month in a couple of weeks. That's gone. So it's, I'm facing these disappointments, but the work still stands. And so the Then plus the Now equals Now Time was commissioned by Merz Music in Berlin, and I premiered it in 2019. And it was, I continued my collaboration with Daan van Huyn, who's a choreographer and has directed some of my pieces, and we've worked together in this voice movement aspect. And so this piece is like an artistic quest about politicizing the past, undoing and settling time and space using music and movement. So it's looking at Walter Benjamin's ideas of Eingedenken and the concept of remembering as an act of responsibility. And it's also so prescient for now, how we're choosing to remember things, misremember, that how that has an effect on our present time, and then also the future. And you're in Seattle and you're seeing things playing out in your country. I'm here in London, I'm seeing things playing out. And it's as though we're not learning. We keep making the same mistakes. And so that's what these pieces are actually talking about. That I'm just always talking about this act of remembrance. Remembering as an act of responsibility. And I guess that's what all my works are really centered around in some way or other. Wow. So that means, it's something that I think about a lot. I don't know if I have all the answers, but I guess the pieces that I create pose those questions. Or I guess it's trying to, I'm inviting the audience to engage with those questions and to really think and reflect on the answers. But I don't need their answers. I want them to think about it.
Yeah.
And so again, I don't even mind if people don't like what I do, but if they can think about why they don't like it, then that's a good thing.
That's great. That's also a very philosophical approach to what you do. It's not just the music, it's beyond that, beyond the music, beyond what you're seeing. And it's also something you experience after you leave. Of course, classical music or jazz or other genres, you kind of have certain feelings, maybe even a couple of days later. But what you do, it also makes you think about certain questions, maybe, or topics or ideas that you might feel uncomfortable with, you might not like, but it's good that it's there because it makes you think. And that's the great thing, the special thing about music in general, at least for me, is that and great music is that, of course, it's entertainment a little bit, but the other part is also something that will challenge you and make you think. So that's what a great piece of work does, at least for me. You mentioned Jeanne Lee, and I had Rand Blake. I don't know if you know Rand Blake.
I don't know him personally. Of course, I know who he is. Yes.
Rand Blake, he was on my podcast, and he talked about Jeanne Lee, and he's very much inspired by her as well. So it was great, and I didn't know of her work till I started looking into his work because I was going to have him on the podcast, and I was like, oh wow, this name is coming up a lot. So, and he spoke very highly of her work and their collaboration.
And she was an amazing artist, just astonishing. And I'm uncovering little bits, more things, even snippets of film footage. I mean, she was real spit and polish. She wasn't grand. She because of her movement work, the way she vocalized was very embodied, and that's the way that I work. It would sound completely different, and our approaches aren't the same, but I understand what she was doing, what she was trying to do. And as an improviser also, I mean, just how she was working with the voice, there weren't many singers doing that in jazz in particular. There were classical singers working with extended vocal technique, but they weren't, which would have come out of improvisation, but they weren't improvising it because the composer will have found a way to notate it. And then, you know, so they weren't free improvising, whereas Jeanne Lee was improvising and really coloring words and working with text and consonants in a way and vowels, in such an inventive way. Kind of opening up the possibilities of what text could be. It's the musicality of the word, and it's fascinating. I mean, it's just so rich. So I guess because I was kind of wary of saying she was an influence or an inspiration, but I am inspired by what she did completely. Yes. When I first heard her years ago as a teenager, I really didn't like her voice. I really didn't. I just thought, it's a bit it's not, you know, because I had an idea of what, as you do when you're a teenager, you have very strict ideas of what jazz singer should sound like. And so I had to mature and grow up a bit before I could really understand what it was she was doing. And her voice is very honest, very honest.
You mentioned something about improvising, so I have to ask, improvising,
Okay.
How did you come to improvise? Because, you know, my early training was classical music, and I was interested in jazz and improvised music when I was in high school.
Well, I grew up, I sang a lot of gospel music. I belonged to a church-going family, and so we're thinking, I was the improviser. Well, there's a lot of improvisation going on when you're singing gospel because you're in the moment and you're expressing love and you're communicating a text. And but the reason why I mention it is because quite often you would be called upon at very short notice to perform or sing. Okay, so the scenario, because not everyone is kind of organized, the scenario would be there'd be a visiting speaker, a pastor or something at your church, and someone's heard that they know you can sing, or you know your friend can play the piano really well. People play by ear a lot and stuff. So I said, we need a song for the midday service or something. Elaine, can you sing? Like, but I haven't prepared anything. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know. It's all right. The Lord will give you the words. Like, the Lord will have to give me the words. I don't. We haven't even. So it's this general kind of, we haven't had time to practice. I mean, you're literally going up, and you may have just hissed, it's hymn 1, 2, 6. First verse, second verse, chorus twice, and you're kind of hissing that, and then you go up. I don't even know what key I'm singing in, and because you haven't worked it out, because you've got this amazingly talented group of players as well. I mean, they can read, but they've got incredible ears, and you just get up and you do it. Or you might be playing the piano, and there's an elder church member who's leading the congregation, and they really don't know what key they're singing in, and they're just going from one song to the next, and you just have to follow them. You just have to go with them, you know. And if you go wrong, they're looking at you like, why are you not playing? So that's when you've grown up in that environment, you don't know that's training. That's musical training. That is learning to be flexible, learning to improvise on the spot, to deal with a highly stressed situation, to be in the moment. And also you're learning how to present yourself, yes, to a sympathetic audience, but it's an audience nevertheless, and quite often a large group of people. So when I went to music college, I was like, studied classically and did some jazz and stuff like that. And it was a bit more kind of structured to the improvisation, but I never really considered myself a jazz singer. I don't know, I had a friend who performed in the London Improvisers Orchestra, and so I kind of heard a bit about that. I don't know how I really got into it. I just think there was an extemporization competition at music college. So there was a group of us that said, okay, let's go in for this competition. And I actually did a duo with another singer, and we improvised, and it felt very free and cool for me. It felt very natural. It just felt like the right thing to do. I did not win the competition, but my friend won it. Another friend won it. So that was, I guess, it kind of developed from there alongside my kind of vocal ability and to be able to express in a non-mainstream way. And just because the scene in London is so strong, you kind of go to where improvisers perform. And I must say that, 15, 20 years ago, they weren't as open to classical musicians coming in and improvising. They really were not open arms. But that has thankfully changed a lot. And yeah, I've made some very, very good friends in that scene. I've been so lucky to work with some of the most amazing free improvisers, like world class. Been really lucky, actually. So, yeah. But when you're doing it, you're on the same, it's very democratic, let's put it that way. When you're on the stand and it's ear training and it's real ensemble playing when it's at its best, because it's not about the ego. Yeah.
I just wish it was a bit more part of the education, because it trains you in so many other ways. For example, for classical musicians or from an early age. I've said this story so many times on the podcast, but I've had an experience of asking kids to improvise, and the ones who were much younger, like 10, had an easier time of just letting go and just doing stuff instead of like a 17 or 18-year-old who's more capable on their instrument and is having a harder time of just letting go and doing something. Like, oh, well, what note? Am I playing the right note in this key, or should I do this? I did that rhythm too many times. Should I, and where you take like a 10-year-old and they're like, okay, I'm just going to do this, whatever. I'm just going to at least try something, So I just wish it was taught earlier on, and at least let kids, experience the feeling of just playing and listening and playing with others. I don't know.
I think that's right. It hasn't always been. Well, it's surprising for me, having been educated here and gone through the music education system here, that improvisation is kind of encouraged now. I mean, I've been invited. I've got colleagues who've been invited into teaching, particularly free improv, as an elective at music college. Wow. That was unheard of. I was joking about the extemporization competition. I think they wanted me to extemporize on a Rossini aria, and that was never going to happen, okay? Or a Mozart aria or something like that. That was never going to happen. And I really admire people who can do it. Let's just have that. I mean, that is a craft and a skill. But you're right, children can improvise freely, generally, because they're less inhibited. There's no wrong. So one of the things that when I've been asked to teach students at music college, I tell them, or if I give a workshop, it's about a laboratory. It is a place of experimenting, and there is no wrong. When we're in this room, it's a safe space. There's no wrong. So just explore and enjoy it. And don't worry about, should I? Just be in the moment. And it's really fascinating watching how people let go, some willingly, some unwillingly, let go of everything they know that's, they've ever been taught, the right things, and then just be and see what happens. Because if you're musical and if you're listening, you can make music out of anything. You really can. That's why children can do it, because they're not, you know, they're not hung up about rhythm or, you know, timbre or intonation. They're not hung up, they're just making, they're just being, they're in the moment. And that's what you need when you, particularly with free improvisation, when you're working in jazz. Of course, you need to know your changes, and you need to know, there's so much, because it's, you know, you have to work at that.
Yeah.
Because you have to be ready to respond as well. But what makes it interesting is having those tools, having that knowledge, but being in the moment. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to know when that happens, but when it does, it's so liberating.
Wow. Well, we talked a lot about music and your career and music in general. What do you do outside of music?
I decided I wanted to learn how to knit properly. So last year, January 2019, my New Year's resolution was learn how to knit. So I have been knitting, and that's the thing that I really enjoy doing. I was just thinking, actually, before joining this podcast, that I have a blanket, a summer blanket to knit, and my neighbours have a little baby, and I wanted to knit a blanket as a present. And then I was just thinking, and there's that jumper I need to finish. So it's a whole load of things, which I thought over lockdown I would have just knitted away. But I felt very tired, and I just decided I'll get back to knitting when I feel like it. So knitting, gardening, which I enjoy doing, and reading, not just for research, but for pleasure. And cooking. It sounds really boring, doesn't it? No, it's just I love the discipline of following a recipe. Uh-huh. So when I'm doing that, I'm completely focused on it. Uh-huh. I'm not great at rustling up a dish out of thin air. Uh-huh. I really love the discipline of following a recipe. So
that's really interesting, because you're an improviser. I would think you're just like, I'm just gonna put something together.
No way. If that would be disastrous. If I just try to throw something, I just put it's a nightmare. It really is.
Yeah,
it's awful. So I love following recipes, and I've been baking lots of bread, and I know lots of people have been Instagramming their sourdough loaves, right? But no, I'm just doing really basic loaves of bread. Wow. So today I've baked for myself a wholemeal loaf of bread, which tastes all right, actually. So I haven't done that for myself for a long time. And I've baked a cake. Wow. As well. Wow. Which is cooling on the wire rack as we speak. So I'm looking forward to tasting that later. But it's been really interesting talking about work and being asked these questions, because I realise that it's something that I don't do very often, but the more widely my work is being known, the more I'm being asked these questions. And it's really good, because it helps me to really kind of reflect in a more objective way about what I'm trying to do. And after this, I will be thinking, is this the right way, or what do I need to improve on? But I'm so fortunate to have had the example laid before me from other wonderful artists, and also to receive encouragement from colleagues. It's a great family to be part of.
What you do is, emotionally might be really tough, but also I imagine it'll be really kind of tiring physically. So is that already your exercise, or do you do some other exercise as well?
Yeah, I do. No, I do. I work with a dance company, with Dam Van Hoon's company, when sadly coronavirus has put paid to that, but we've done sessions online together, and I do exercise at home because I need to keep my stamina up. So there I do some weight training as well as cardio. Try to run, but I'm not so good at running, to be honest, but it's more about keeping just maintenance right now, because when you work with professional dancers, it's another ball game.
Yeah.
It's another ball game. I mean, what I've learned from that experience is this 100%. Because if you don't commit 100%, someone could get hurt.
Yeah.
So and I love that, because that's fed into what I do as a singer. And, you know, they do 8 hours in the studio. You know, that's 8 hours of physical work. So you come out of it and your brain's kind of addled, but you're physically. And I really miss it. I miss it because, you know, an hour-long workout or 45 minutes, it's nothing. And it's the same with practicing music. You know, when you've got to put the hours in. I mean, you know this, you've got to put the hours in, because that's the stamina that's been built for when you actually are in a production or trying to, you're doing an orchestral rehearsal as a conductor. You know, it requires a lot of stamina, but you need to do the preparation before in order to see it through. So it's all like a sport, you know, it's about building the stamina. It's just as you get older, you've got more wide range, but you may not have the energy levels in quite the same way. So you manage your energy levels in a different way. So and that's fascinating in itself, I think.
With all your experiences, everything that you've done, advice to young musicians, you know, a lot of people struggle to kind of put a career together. They graduate college, they're like, well, I don't even know what to do, or they're just having a hard time, maybe not doing so well in competitions. Just so many things in music. What advice would you give them?
Oh gosh, that's a really good one. I was asked a similar question recently about navigating your way. I think for young musicians, I think the two things you've got to remember is really be confident, and that confidence grows over time. You know, it's not an immediate thing. Some people blast out of the starting blocks, you know, and they're the, you know, and they're like, wow, and you could see where that career's going. It's like bang, 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 and it's like, wow, that's amazing. Most people don't have that kind of career, but what you want is a long career. You know, so that requires looking after yourself, your mental health, your physical health, and when you're focused on that, you can tackle all the other things. You can cope. You learn to deal with those other things, and it won't floor you. Or I mean, we have the highs and lows, so it's how you learn to cope with that. And it takes confidence confidence in yourself to say, "I'm struggling," but don't be afraid to say that. You know, and to trust. Be confident enough to trust your gut instincts. You know, really trust that, and to, you know, to do your absolute utmost. You know, just don't hold anything back. Don't be intimidated by what other people might say. Know what it is that you have is unique and it's special, and that's what stands you out. It's not about being proud. It's knowing what you have that is special, and really following that through completely, 100%, to be unafraid, to be fearless, you know. And that's, you're going to get knocks. You just get back up, because the knocks, they're just a knock, but that actually, you know, you've got, you know, like kids show their scars, you know, and they're full, I got this big scab here. That came from that. And you just have to kind of show that. So, I had this is when I got rejected by, I had a folder on my desktop called "No Thanks, ha ha," or you know, or something like that. And all the rejections went in there. All the rejections, and there've been many. There have been many. And then when you're on a roll and something's happening great, you might go back to that folder and you look at it and you just start laughing. You know, it really wasn't that bad. I'm so glad I didn't do it in the end. I wasn't ready. And also being honest with yourself that actually you may not be ready for the experience that you're really yearning for right now. You need to do something else.
Hmm.
Rome was not built in a day. Yawn, but it's true.
Yeah.
Patience is really important.
That's amazing advice. And did you have anything else to add before we end? I think this podcast went on the longer side of what I do, because you're just such a fascinating.
I'm so sorry.
No, you're great. And I never really prepare questions. I kind of just read and listen to the artists I'm going to talk to, and kind of just have things in mind, but also write some things down. But there's no formal questions. But I also had some other things, but maybe we'll get to it some other time. But
yeah, definitely. It's so nice to meet you. Thank you so much for reaching out and inviting me to speak. It was interesting. The early, 2-3 months ago, I could not have been able to do this. So I needed the space, because everything felt so raw, and even though, it's not a personal thing, don't take it personally, but also, you learn to give thanks and be grateful for health and life. And actually, we're musicians, we're not, healthcare professionals, we're not saving lives. What we do is music. It might save our livelihoods, that's a different thing, but, and it's nourishment in another way. So that's why I go back to how I wanted this experience to define me, and that's my choice. And I want to be positive as much as possible. So thank you, because this is a positive experience.
Well, thank you. No, this was great. I've done over 100 podcasts at this point, 100 episodes. And when I was getting to 100, I wrote to some people, and I think on Instagram or something, I said, hey, this has been great, because I feel like I got another degree, or even better than a degree, because I learned so much from each person. I talk to you, I get some names, I'm like, oh, that's interesting, I'll look that up. And like Rand Blake, I talked to him, or before even talking to him, I learned about Jeanne Lee, who I didn't know about. So it's really a learning experience for me. It's been so fascinating. So thank you.
Likewise. Thank you for inviting me, and take care of yourself.
Have a beautiful day, and hope we do this in person one day.
Yes, looking forward to it. Take care.
Thanks for listening to Let's Talk Off the Podium. If you enjoyed this episode, please comment, share, and subscribe. Stay tuned for the next episode.